the word Tel Aviv with the word Caesarea, and you have a very, very similar dynamic. What's also common to these two cities, they spring out of the sand dunes, out of nothing, and become a major metropolis with a massive population and untold riches being constantly traded in them virtually overnight. Guys, this is the main road of Caesarea during the life of King Herod, if you will, which is the prelogue, if you will, to the life of Christ. Tel Aviv, to address Jennifer's questions, Tel Aviv today, Caesarea 2,000 years ago, although Tel Aviv came into existence from much less horrible and selfish reasons than Caesarea. And both are a wonder, each one in its own way. And let's begin the lecture up here. Let's continue. Wonderful. My friends, please notice an original 2,100-year-old paint job. 2,100 years old, first century before Christ paint job. And the city in the time of King Herod would have been completely and utterly plastered in white. Why is that? Any ideas? What would compel Herod to plaster this entire city in white? And folks, how many of you have driven in the desert of Nevada at night and seen the city of Las Vegas and the spectacle of light which it presents during the nighttime? Caesarea exists to attract the merchant ships, which means there's a thriving industry of shipping between Rome and Alexandria, Egypt. The breadbasket for the Federal Union, which is the Roman Empire, happens to be the delta of the River Nile in Egypt. That's where all the grain would be raised. And effectively, that is the Midwest for the Roman Empire. Ships are constantly traveling back and forth between Rome and Alexandria, making many port calls for trade along the way. And King Herod creates this city to be very, very, very attractive. Guys, the men that work on these ships, what would they like? What will make a port city attractive for them? And you can write it in the comments if you will, and if you have any ideas. And for the deckhands, guys, any ideas? What do sailors like? Correct. And sailors today and sailors 2,000 years ago like exactly the same things. And King Herod, which has infinite wealth, makes sure that these are found in abundance in the city of Caesarea. What will be the captains of these boats, the men responsible for the safety of the cargo, the ship, and its crew? What will be attractive to these people, which probably also come from a higher epsilon in society and have a much better education? What will be attractive to the ship captain? Correct. The ship captain would want a safe harbor. He will want sail menders. He will want shipwrights. And the business owner, the ship owner, the shipping company owner, the businessman, what is it that he would like? What would he feel that is attractive? And I assume that 2,000 years ago, the businessmen wanted exactly what the businessmen want today. And Herod, who is an evil genius in this case, obviously good taverns and hotels, he displays something which I feel is a very, very fine understanding of human nature. So guys, a boat in the first century never strays more than 3 or 4 miles from the coast. The boat may never lose eye contact with the coastline. Were they to do so, this boat gets lost. That's the navigational constraints of the first century before Christ and first century after Christ. It means every evening the sun sets in the west, and this entire city in its 20,000 residents reflects the light of a setting sun. The deckhand at this point says to his captain, "Captain, Captain, look, we could use an extra brush of paint here, and this plank is a little out of place." And you know what the sailor is thinking. The captain goes to his boss and says, "Hey, boss, remember last time we were in Caesarea and King Herod brings in all of these caravans from far and wide in the Middle East with all of these trading opportunities, and we made a killer profit." Which means everyone wins from coming to Caesarea. And in the world of Jerusalem, everything revolves around the temple. And in Caesarea, everything revolves around commerce. King Herod the Great makes a 10% cut from every transaction between the European shipping companies and the Middle Eastern caravaneers, which means he doesn't have to own any of the merchandise. He only provides a sales platform, which is exactly what Jeff Bezos does, or Frank Bezos, I don't recall the man's name, with Amazon. It's exactly the same thing of the ancient world. And guys, the white color scheme, original, 2,100 years old, part of the marketing strategy. Let's continue. Let's go into the theater. The theater of Caesarea, truly a marvel to behold. And it comfortably seats 5,000 people today. And it's a status symbol today in the Israeli society. How does a performing artist know he made it in show business? It's by filling the house in Caesarea. And this has not changed, or has changed, because there was an interval in the middle, but the building is used today for the same purpose Herod designed it 2,100 years ago. It gets even better than that. Let's see the next slide. Guys, you notice that semicircle over there? In the 4th century, there's an early church father called Eusebius of Caesarea, and he writes to the Christian community of Caesarea, and he says, "Do not go to the theater of Herod's, because they fill it with water. They divert water from the aqueduct, and they fill that semicircle with water, and they have coordinated swimming performances here. And the young ladies who are performing these coordinating swimming feats are all naked, which was customary in the Roman world." And Eusebius is warning his congregants not to go there, because if they will see the naked women and think lustful thoughts, they will surely go to hell. What can we now scientifically deduce? If I know Eusebius is active in the 4th century, I know the building was created in the 1st century before Christ, I know there's almost a 5-century interval between the two, I can now scientifically deduce to the level of engineering and craftsmanship, and Herod saving no effort or expense, making this the best that could possibly exist in the world at the time. Let's continue. Okay, the palace of Herod, and we are definitely going to talk about that. Let's go in for a closer look. Wonderful. Guys, this is a one of a kind. There's nothing like this, never before and never after. King Herod the Great, and we despise this human being, and yet we address him as King Herod the Great, created a fresh water pool surrounded entirely by the Salton Mediterranean Sea. Which means even the most well-traveled people amongst us who've been to many, many fine resorts in the world today in the 20th and 21st century don't swim in fresh drinking water surrounded on all sides by Salton Sea. No one does that, except for King Herod the Great, which is the third wealthiest person on the planet for his time frame. How exactly does the king of a not particularly important kingdom become the third wealthiest person on the planet? We should definitely look into and explore. Let's see the next slide, please. Wonderful. Guys, remember we discussed in our previous lecture about the Old City in Jerusalem about Herod dying in -4 before Christ. And the census, which is described in the gospel, takes place in -4, which means after Herod is dead, the title King of the Jews is completely and utterly abolished. And the three boys, Herod, Herod, and Herod, are now called patriarchs or quartermasters. And there will be a Roman governor supervising the Roman province of Judea. The census of -4 is the Roman act of organizing the kingdom of Judea into the Roman province of Judea. Which means if that is the case and Christ is born during the census, then surely we are not in the year 2020 right now, we are in 2024. Let's go back one slide. And guys, the fifth of these governors is one Pontius Pilate that we now have indisputable evidence to the fact that he exists exactly where and when we expect him to exist. Guys, let's go one generation before the life of Christ. And the Roman Empire is divided between three strong men. Octavian Julii resides in Rome. Mark Antony resides in Alexandria. And there's another guy called Aemilius Lepidus, which resides in Carthage, and we don't care about it. Octavian Julii and Mark Antony are the next in line to be emperor. And Octavian Julii is the blood heir of Julius Caesar. Mark Antony is the lifelong lieutenant of Julius Caesar. And these two are about to duke it out in a place called Actium, which is in the Greek islands. Herod, a vassal king of the eastern portion of the Roman Empire, belongs to Mark Antony. He is ordered by his lord and liege to attend him and participate in this battle on his behalf. Yet Herod the fox, and notice how the scripture always addresses Herodians as the fox, tell this fox, or the fowl of the nest have their, the fowl of the air have their nest, the fox has his hole. And when we say fox, usually in the New Testament, we mean Herodian. The fox, the great fox, the great fox has not a ounce of royal blood in him, and he usurped his way to the throne, he understands that to support Mark Antony is going to be a horrible, horrible, horrible idea. He also cannot openly defy Mark Antony. And when a letter arrives in his court in Jerusalem, he wrote a very, very polite, very respectful, non-confrontational letter to his boss and said, I would love to come and support you in your upcoming battle. Unfortunately, there's a horrible plague in my army, and I'm afraid that my men will contaminate your men, and no one will be in top fighting form when we engage Marcus Agrippa, Octavian's general. And this is, my friends, the ancient world version of the dog ate my homework. And no, you can't write an email and figure out if the guy is lying or not. You simply can't do it in the first century before Christ. A second letter arrives at the court of King Herod. And the letter says, Herod, you had plenty of time to remedy your medical issues. Come and support me with all of your horses and all of your men. To which Herod wrote a very polite, very non-confrontational letter and says, my beloved liege, lord and master, Mark Antony, whom the gods, Mars and Jupiter have ordained will be the next emperor, I would love to support you in your upcoming battle. Nevertheless, the Jews are starting all sorts of rebellions in the kingdom of Judea, and I need my army to protect the home front. By the third letter, Herod was out of excuses, and within the time frame, I cannot describe to you all of the shenanigans he did to actually not show up on the battlefield. But this is the slowest march in recorded military history, with the entire purpose of the march is to look like he's doing something while he's in fact not doing it. And by the end of the battle, Mark Antony and Cleopatra lost and committed suicide, and Octavian Julii now styles himself Emperor Augustus. He summons Herod to the Isle of Rhodes, and when Herod arrives, the emperor, the newly crowned emperor, says to him, Herod, what am I to do with you? On one hand, you supported my enemy, Mark Antony. On the other hand, you betrayed him, which means if I do not punish you, a message will be sent to the client kings of the Roman Empire that betrayal is okay, and to oppose the emperor is okay. On the other hand, your absence from the battlefield was advantageous for my cause. If I punish you, what message will I send to the Roman Empire? That it's a bad idea to support the emperor? Herod looks the emperor in the eye and says to him, Emperor, I was never loyal to Mark Antony, nor am I loyal to you. I am loyal to the Roman Empire, its system of values, its greater glory and prosperity, which is modern day terminology. I am not loyal to any executive in the cooperation. I'm loyal to the cooperation. Since it was unclear who is in control of the Roman Empire, how can you expect me to know whom should I support? As long as you hold a tight grip on the Roman Empire, you can rely on my support. The Roman Emperor Augustus gives Herod, the king of the Jews, the title friend of the people and Senate of Rome for life. And this comes with a boon. And the only legal entity in the entire Roman Empire that doesn't pay any taxes to the federal government happens to be the king of the Jews. Ophir, who is your current governor in the state of Wisconsin?
That would be, let me see here, Tony, what's his name, Deb? Tony Evers, right.
So let's analog this to our modern day America. Governor Evers receives from the Emperor Trump the following terms and conditions. No more re-elections, ever. You are dictator for life in Wisconsin. You and you alone, Governor Evers, will decide how much IRS the people of Wisconsin will pay. And you alone, from all of the 50 governors of the federal union, can extort as much as you want from your population and is completely and utterly exempt from passing on a single cent to the federal budget in DC. This is the terms and conditions that King Herod had. All of the crazy building projects, this freshwater pool, the deep water port, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the artificial mountain, Masada in the desert, and many other building projects, where did the money come from? He's the only guy who has these finances. After he dies in -4, the title King of the Jews is abolished. Now let's go to the next slide. The fifth, next slide. Previous slide, Pontius Pilate. The fifth governor resides in this palace, the palace of Herod. The fifth governor will also reside in the former palatial residence when he goes to Jerusalem during the high holidays, when Jerusalem becomes a big deal because all of the Jews are there because of the high holiday. The fifth governor also asks Jesus Christ one question and one question only. Are you the King of the Jews? If Jesus Christ says, no, I am not the King of the Jews, then as far as Pontius Pilate is concerned, Pontius Pilate would say, well, sir, have a lovely afternoon, and I'm very sorry for detaining you. Because why would the pagan Pontius Pilate care about an internal theological disagreement between two factions of Jews? The ones who follow the high priest Caiaphas from the temple, and other Jews who follow that popular preacher from the country, from Galilee. He worships Jupiter and Mars. What does he care about? He doesn't. He really couldn't care less. This very well-educated man, Pontius Pilate, remembers very, very, very well that in the entire history of the entire Roman Empire, there was only one legal entity that was exempt from paying taxes to the federal budget in Rome, the King of the Jews. This is post-Palm Sunday, and if this person from the Galilee could technically become the King of the Jews, what happens to the job of Roman governor of the province of Judea? Because there's either King of the Jews or Roman governor. They never coexisted. And if said legal entity comes back into existence, was the 31 before Christ terms and condition between Herod and Augustus a one-time deal between Herod and Augustus, or is it a binding agreement between entity Roman Empire, entity King of the Jews? The answer to it is unknown till this day, and Pontius Pilate truly didn't want to find out. Guys, let's continue. Okay, one generation after the life of Christ, and this is still the capital of Judea for the Roman people, St. Paul is incarcerated in Caesarea for 2 years. We don't know exactly where in town he was incarcerated. It's a city of 20,000 people at the time. Not all of it was properly excavated. we have a very, very strong suspicion that the trial of St. Paul before the governor Festus was conducted in this, which is the bureau section of this palatial / governor mansion of Caesarea, on very, very high probability. Let's continue. Okay, guys, this is a little bit of a surprise, and this is a public toilet from 2,000 years ago. In our previous discussion about the city of David, we saw an older toilet, which was 3,000 years ago. This is a mere 2,100 years. Nevertheless, one can sit on it, which makes, in my opinion, for a very entertaining Christmas card for our visitors. Let's continue. Okay, the racetrack of Caesarea. And we all saw the movie Ben-Hur. And unfortunately, I cannot recreate the racetrack with horses and chariots because I don't have it in the budget of the tours. But what I do is I ask the people to hold hands, and then 2 more people to hold their shoulders, and we effectively create a Roman chariot. We then race a little bit, and this is a constant of teamwork just as much as it is a constant of speed. I found it a fun and entertaining way to illustrate how things were back in the 1st century. In this very, very same racetrack, by the way, while Herod is still alive, he pays some lip tribute to Jewish custom, which means there's no gladiator combat here until -4. Once Herod dies, and this is no longer the Jewish kingdom, but the Roman province of Judea, now there's gladiator combat in the open, and no one cares about the customs of the Jews. There's a very famous rabbi called Resh Lachish, who used to be a gladiator in this arena before he was a rabbi. And the very, very famous Rabbi Akiva is executed by the Romans in this very arena in 135 AD, after the Bar Kokhba revolution. The Romans comb his body with massive metal combs while he is shouting, "Hear, O Israel." And there's a nearby town called Or Akiva, commemorating the name of Rabbi Akiva, who was executed in the same gladiator / racetrack of Caesarea as a spectacle in the 2nd century AD. Let's continue. The little statues that you see is in front of one of the gates that allowed the horses to be launched onto the track. And you can see that there are later additions to the track, which we can see on the left-hand side, which are all post the death of Herod, and the infrastructure which Herod created being modified to serve different purposes. Let's continue. Some of the urban Caesarea. Let's continue. Guys, it's very impressive. It's a very, very impressive site. Some of the bathhouse complex, it's Byzantine, yet very impressive on its own right. And let's continue. For those who are interested, I personally don't think it's such a big deal, but of late, and they launched 3D virtual reality tour, with which you hire the VR goggles and you just walk around. And in the VR goggles, you get to interact with people from the 1st century, and the whole thing becomes as if it is the first century. The technology has its flaws. It's a cool thing if we have a lot of time. Usually on the pace we run these tours, I don't think we can afford it time. Let's continue. This goes on. My friends, not all of Caesarea is excavated. As you can see, the city stretches for several miles, and this is but a small fraction of the massive town in the first century. Let's continue. And let's continue. Guys, the mosaic, as you can see over here, is late Roman or Byzantine. And at this point, Judaism and Christianity are heavily influencing each other. So even though it is not Jews who made it, there is no graven image on this early Christian artwork. Let's continue. Of course, in the pagan world, there would have been plenty of that. Wonderful. Guys, this is part of the Roman city. And when Paul is incarcerated there for 2 years, Paul was very, very, very sensitive about idolatry. He really, really didn't like that. And he also really, really, really didn't like the brothels and pornification. He was very open-minded about the practical mitzvot in allowing the non-Jewish people to be grafted into the house of Israel. But there were certain things that he just wouldn't turn a blind eye to. And in his 2 years of his incarceration in Caesarea, he's surrounded by the things that bother him. And this is something for the ministers, which I think is worthwhile to ponder for when we will visit there. Let's continue. Let's go into the port. Wonderful. And before we go into port, these are the chambers of commerce. And I believe the terminology chamber of commerce, which we use, comes from this in the ancient world. Effectively, there are caravans coming in from every corner of the Middle East. There will be ships coming in from every corner of the Mediterranean basin. Each one of these merchants have tons and tons and tons of merchandise, which means anyone can go to the public market where retailers work, but to these chambers of commerce, only the titans of industry can go. The ship owners and the caravan owners. They go in there with small samples of their wares, and if and when they are able to transact, then and only then they'll tell their schleppers, unload 5 tons of barley and load 6 tons of olive or whatever. I can't prove this, but I very, very strongly believe that the terminology we use, Chamber of Commerce in America today, is derived from this concept in the Roman world. Let's continue. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. My friends, look at that. Look at that work of art. If you can, just enlarge it on your screen. And guys, you don't need the little sign over there, but if you look really carefully at the work of art, you'll notice there are snakes coming out of the lady's head. Which mythological creature are we talking about?
It's the Medusa.
Correct. Which means someone paid for a piece of material which doesn't exist anywhere in the Holy Land. This is marble, and we have not a single marble depository anywhere in the Holy Land. And judging by the quality, this is Italian marble. Then said person pays an artisan to shape it in art in such a level, someone else understands a few seconds of looking at it via a little screen 2,100 years later, exactly what this artisan is talking about. This is good art, and this is very, very, very costly to import. And this is someone's sarcophagi, which means if this amount of surplus income exists in town, what can we deduce about the success of this venture capitalism idea by King Herod the Great? We have very good scientific evidence that this city was insanely wealthy. And the people have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. While we study the scripture, we learn that the people in Capernaum and other such places are starving. And this massive social injustice is a very fertile ground for popular, egalitarian country preachers to work in. Let's continue. Guys, the port in Caesarea, never before and never after has anyone did what Herod did here. This is the first commercial usage of cement in human history. And effectively, countless amount of volcanic ash, which is proto-cement from Italy, is important, a certain composition of volcanic ash, which will solidify upon contact with water. Tens of thousands of laborers are working in the project. And I want to say harbor, but Herod defies nature and creates a port with no harbor. He creates an artificial harbor where God has not provided him with a harbor. And tens of thousands of men are sinking hundreds of thousands of wooden caissons filled with this proto-cement from barges, creating a deep water safe harbor with no safe port with no natural harbor. No one does that, not today in the 20th and 21st century. And look at the megalomania of this man Herod. Where there's no harbor, he created a port. And when the mountain God chose for his temple was unsatisfactory for him, he chopped it down and made the mountain bigger for his temple that nature was not, didn't provide him with a flat surface like he wanted. And this megalomania of this man we can clearly see in the relics which he left behind. Let's continue. Guys, this is the work of my own teacher and my trainer in archaeology, Dr. Michael Eisenberg. The Rothschild Foundation granted Dr. Eisenberg an insane sum of money. And what Dr. Eisenberg did here is he reconstructed, in my opinion, a little too much, which means he didn't pick a specific era and try to reconstruct it, which I would have picked the first century. He is doing the stairway from the first century BC. You can see the arches are from the 7th century post-First Jihad, they're Muslim. And he also reconstructs a little bit of both the Byzantine and Crusader era. I feel that in this particular case, Dr. Eisenberg had too much money and he couldn't make up his mind, but I'm not sure that this is advantageous. Let's continue. Oh, this is actually, I was supposed to be hired for this, but I refused to do it. Let's go. This is Dr. Eisenberg doing a genius level of reconstruction, and I have no argument or dispute about it. And in this case, you can see the nympheon, which is a Roman decorative pool. And notice that the Roman gods and emperor, which is a god to them, would be displayed. And notice it's displayed on purpose in front of the reflecting pool to make it look bigger and more impressive. Cool. Fear, let's continue. Wonderful. One of my favorite things about the Holy Land is, if you want to see ancient Egypt, and we had a lecture about that, you should go to Egypt. If you want to see Greece and Rome, you should go to Greece and Rome. If you want to see medieval castles, you should go to Europe. There's only one place in the world where they are on top of another. In this case, you can see a Roman road from the 1st century before Christ, but the city wall, what you see, is King Louis IX from France. St. Louis is named after this man, and Louisville as well. So guys, we have a 1200s city wall and fortification, Crusader European, right over the Roman. Beneath that, in this case, we won't find ancient Egypt and Old Testament, but in other cases in the Holy Land, we most certainly will. Let's go in for a closer look. So guys, the moat on the right-hand side in the Holy Land, moats don't have water, ever. Water is far too precious in this part of the world to be used. But look at the architecture at the Neo-Romanesque or early Gothic, which we later see in the European cathedral building in the Crusader fortification at Caesarea from the Crusader incarnation of Caesarea, which of course the Crusader incarnation of Caesarea is about 20% the size, much poorer and much less technologically advanced than Roman Caesarea, which was 1100 years older than Crusader Caesarea. And the fact that we're moving forward in time doesn't always mean we're moving forward in civilization. Let's continue. Last but certainly not least, one of the many aqueducts. The city has a very complex system of aqueducts providing water. This was built by King Herod, but this current is actually a Hadrianic renovation. And we can actually see the graffiti of the legion that did it. During the Bar Kokhba revolt, Hadrian's brought 250,000 soldiers to put down the Bar Kokhba revolt. The vast majority of these soldiers never saw any action, and Emperor Hadrian's just used them for infrastructure projects far and wide in the whole land. I believe this is the last one. Fear, is it the last one?
Yeah, it's not going any further, Edan. So I think this is the last one. And what a great picture to end the lecture with. I mean, this is you've got the beach and you've got the archaeology and you've got.
Fear, I actually brought my wife and 2 daughters, and we sat there on the beach just before the virus outbreak, and we had no idea what's heading our way.
I think that's true for everybody. Edan, so thank you very much for this absolutely fascinating lecture about the city of Caesarea, which, like I wrote in the emails to everybody, is one of the iconic sites, historical sites in Israel. It really is. It should be on everybody's must visit, must see list. We have with us, by the way, here, Deb. Deb, are you with us? Can you unmute yourself for a second?
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Okay, shalom, Deb.
Shalom.
So Deb, you've been to Caesarea before, is that correct?
Yes, many times.
Many times. And you've traveled through me. I'm honored for several times. Several would be the understatement of the year, wouldn't it?
Yes, I'm looking forward to the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'm glad you enjoyed the lecture. And Edan, you have what do you call it? You had an answer before about the head of the who was it? Medusa, and the answer to that came from our friend Wafika in Cairo, who's also with us on this meeting. So I'd like to wish Wafika a very happy Ramadan holiday, which is still going on these days. You're more than
Thank you,
welcome.
Ophir.
Thank you for joining us. And another person who's also related to the history of the area and who deserves blessings for a very happy Ramadan is our friend Ahmad Sharma, who's joining us from Amman, Jordan. Ahmad, are you with us by chance?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so